Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to start a series on how to code inside of Unity using C Sharp. Bear in mind that this video is going to be channeled towards beginners, and the reason why I'm doing this video is because Unity programming or making a game, right? It's different entirely from programming concept. So programming or making a game is different entirely. Like when you finish learning the basic concepts of coding and then you just jump into a game engine, it's completely different. It's not what you learned. And the reason for this is because teams came together to make a game engine. So it's a combination of different languages. There is probably XML to hold a couple of data, a C++ which was used to make the compiler, and then for Unity, in our case, it's C Sharp, right? Because that's the default language for Unity. Yeah, so if you don't understand some of these concepts, there's no way that you can just dive into making a game of your own. You have to get to know all these things. So, with that being said, why this is a series is because currently there is no way for me to just code for a very long period of time. Okay, I know how much people hate series. I don't like it personally, but then you just have to bear with me if you're following this video. It's going to be a series. When it's done, I'm going to put all the episodes together and I'm going to present it to you. So if you feel like you want to download that, you can go ahead and download that, no problem. So in today's video, we're going to start with the basics of the basic concepts of programming. For those who already know that, you can go ahead and skip this video and go to the next. But for today, we're going to start with the basic concepts, and our topic for today is going to be variables and functions. So let's get into that. Before we start, for those who have never before used Unity before, if you open Unity, this is what your default layout would look like. And so while I'm here is while I'm here, I'm going to create a script so we can begin showing the definition, and then I'm going to show you how to change your development environment if you don't like the default one, which is Visual Studio. So go into your edit, go into your preferences, and then select external tools. If it hasn't been selected yet, you can see external script editor. It's Visual Studio and I'm using 2019. If you have any one of your preference, you can go ahead and set that there, but this has been doing fine for me so far and that should be okay. So create a C Sharp script by right clicking on your project panel, go into create C Sharp script, and then name these variables and function. So let's double click this to open it up in Visual Studio. Okay, so with Visual Studio opened up now, you can take a look at all these using tabs, and then here you can see that this is the script which we made, variables and functions derived under mono behavior, but that's not what we'll be looking at today. We'll look at this in our future video. This title is the title of our script. These classes and these namespaces, I will discuss them further in the future, hopefully. But today we'll start by looking at variables, right? So that's our number one question. What are variables? So variables are kind of a container meant to store data. So you can use this data later on inside of the class to perform various functions or methods, which is where it comes in. Example of functions, as you can see, are these down below. And unlike variables, functions are a combination of data that are meant to execute to either return a value or to make something happen. So it's just there to it's like a behavior in a sense. So those are the simple definitions which I'll give you so far. So the simple example which I can give with the variable is, think about a cup. Okay, In a cup, you can put in water, you can decide to put in coffee, you can decide to put in maybe liquor, beer, anything you feel like. So this is an example of variables. So and then you can do whatever you want with these variables depending on where you place them. So let's start with the five variables. There are actually five, and I'm going to list them now. So the first we'll be looking at is an int. So let's say let's call this first int. Okay, our second variable would be float. Let's call this first float. Third would be string. Let's call this first string. And our last variable is a boolean. Short form for this, or the way it's written here, it's bool. So let's call this first bool. So these are example of variables, and to explain each of them, what I would say is for this int, what should come to your head is would be an integer, right? Because it's an int, and an integer is simply a whole number. So this right here, once you once you list a variable, definitely you have to give it a name so that it knows that it's referring to this variable. So it's kind of like a definition, right? So this first int is the definition for this int, but then if you want to declare this also, you are allowed to do it inside of the class. This way it gets accessed by different functions inside of the script. So for this int now, let's put something like 10. You can see this is okay. So this is an example of a whole number. That's just what I would say. The float is a number with a decimal value, so we can declare this also in our class. And let's mention something, or let's use 2.5 to um, declare this float. So 2.5 will be the declaration for this float after the definition. So this is what a float does. It holds a value in a decimal point, so to speak. It can also be a whole number. It can hold a whole number also, but if you want to use a decimal, it's best you use a float and not an int, because it's going to bring out errors inside of Unity. And the unit for this float is f, especially when you are performing calculations later on when you start making an actual game. So you have to use this f, or else there is going to be an error once or twice anyway. So these two are our number variables, or yeah, our variables for numeration anyway. So these two would handle that. And this string is meant to hold letters or words, or words, so to speak. So to write a string, we don't write it the way we write numbers. As you can see, there is nothing to open and close here when we put in these values. But for a string, you have to open it with a quotation, a double quotation, and close it with a double quotation. So inside this, you write the word you want. In our case, let's type in something like hello, and you can see there are no more errors. Mind you, if I take this out, and I did not mention this, so if this is out, you can see that it's going to show an error over here. You can see there are two errors now. It's telling me that. And even in Unity, once it finishes compiling, it's going to pop up an error which I will have to come back and fix. But with this, you can see everything is okay. So anytime you see this X, it means there's an error, and this good, no issues found, means that everything is okay. All right. So next is our bool, and bool doesn't have the freedom of floats, integers, and strings. This is a value which can be true or false. So the only thing that you can type in a bool is either true, that's if a condition, certain condition is true, or false. This, let's leave this as false, so this should be okay. Now these are the simple variables which you are going to be using, and I mentioned that there are 5 variables actually, but then I only showed you 4. The fifth will come up later on when I start to explain functions, which should be any second now. Now, when you open a script inside Visual, using Visual Studio inside of Unity, it pops up this void start and this void update. And this void start, what it does is, as you can see in this section up here, it says the start is called before the first frame update. So it's called only once in a frame. In an entire game, that's when the game starts, this gets called, and then the update starts to get called, and this update is called once per frame. So each frame that gets updated, this update is being called, and that's like a float value of I don't know the precise value, to be honest with you, but it's not one, it's in decimal. It's a decimal number, and it keeps increasing with time up to when it becomes an integer, and it keeps counting on and on. So once you write a line of code inside the update, it keeps getting executed over and over again. So if you want to type in something here, make sure it's something you want to be constantly checking. Okay, so these are example of methods which Unity which are derived from mono behavior. If I take this mono behavior off, this start and update will not perform their functions the way they are supposed to. Or if you want to test that out, you could go ahead and try that, but then this would be a topic for another day. Now, the type of functions or methods, that's another name for functions. So if you hear methods or functions anywhere, you know that this is partly what they're referring to. Now I'm going to mention some of the types of methods which are available. Now let me start with our first, which would be the int. So let's say something like int number, int number. Inside this int number, the problem with this method is that it has to return, I have to return an integer value. So anytime I'm using this int, I would make sure that I return a number. So let's just type this, return 8. After typing this return 8 to test this inside of Unity to make sure it's working, we can go into our void start and then type in debug.log. And this is a very helpful method, especially when you are planning to detect errors. So just know it's going to print out something in our console, and this is what it's going to print out. It's going to be our number now. So I want our number to be returned, and then we have to open and close this bracket, and at the very end add a semicolon to close this code. Another thing which you should take note of is take a look at all these variables which are declared. I ended them with a semicolon. That's the way you close a line of code inside of using C#. So take note of all this, and for each function or method there is an open and close bracket. That is just the way which you call in function to tell the editor that, hey, this is a function and I want it to be called out, or whatever it is you want to do with that. So let's save this now and go inside of Unity. So right click on your hierarchy, create an empty game object. Let's name these variables and functions. Then let's drag this script under mono behavior to it. That's another function of mono behavior. Let me rename this. It allows you to add in a script to a game object as a component. With that done, let's go into our console and then click play. And like I told you before, the start gets called just once in a frame. But if this were to be in the update, each frame would be updated, and so it would keep on printing the number 8. And this is a way to show that our method is working. So that would be our first method. Second method, as you would expect, let's copy this. Let's paste this here. Let's change this from an integer value to a float. And this also has to return a value. So let's give it something like 2.5. Say F. Let's save this now and let's check this inside Unity. There are two different numbers now, so this gives two instances, which is not something we want. So let's rename this from number to let's call this second number. Let's save this now, and for this let's copy this entire line also, space this here, and let's call this second number. So let's save this and take a look in Unity. And you can see it prints out 8 and 2.5 without the F. So that's just a way to keep the code clean and to avoid errors by all means necessary. Let's go back into Visual Studio. Let's copy these 2 more times. So this, rather than a float, let's call this string. This would be a string. So let's see, let's call this hello. And so rather than return a number now, what we want to return is a string. And let's open these two quotes. So let's type in something like I am learning C#, I guess. And for this would be a boolean value. So let's call this bool. Let's name this my first bool. And this, let's make it return true. So back to our start. Hello, my first bool. So let's copy this and paste this 2 more times. So the first would be hello, and the second would be my first bool. So let's save this and see what it returns. So let's clear our console and play this. And with this, we see everything which we just finished typing. Our int is 8, our float is 2.5, our string I am learning C# has been called upon, and the boolean which we set to true is also true. So it means our functions are working. Now, there is a special kind of method. So let me clear this. There is a special kind of method which you can type in, and it doesn't have to return a value. So even if you don't return a value, it's not going to print out an error to you. And this is the void. And you can see this over on our start and our update. Let's also clear this. So you can see this on our start and the update. It has a void. Now this doesn't have to return any value. So let's type in maybe my first method. And so this is it, my first method. Now I said I would talk about the fifth kind of variable inside when I started talking about functions, and so this variable is called var. This variable is used to represent all these variables put together. So it can be an int, a float, a boolean, or a string. And that is what makes it so special. Although it takes in more, it consumes more space than all these put together, but it's still good, especially if you're maybe feeling lazy to type in a float, int, string, or whatever it is you want to make a reference to. You can just type in a var. And then this var, you can also define it. So let's define this as my var. Let's put this to true, set this to true. My first method. Close it with semicolon, and then here we can debug.log. And this debug would be my var. So this would be it. Let's close this now and save this and check out Unity. So let's play this. You can see it debugs the number 2, which we made it as a variable to us. So these are the basic concepts of variables and functions. If you didn't learn anything today, take this out of the video. A variable is like a cup. In my case, I'm calling it a cup because you put things inside. So there are containers or a cup, just like you put in a drink of water or liquor or whatever it is you feel like taking in. So that's what a variable does. And for a function, it's used to execute a bunch of data. So a function is essentially a behavior, you telling the computer, or rather the game you are trying to make, how to behave at a different set or a different point in time. So it's really flexible, and you can choose to use these variables inside of your method, or you can create variables inside of the method and call upon it, just like I did inside this last method. It will still work whichever way. So take it upon yourself to test out this var and use it to make a string and a boolean and debug it onto your console just to make sure that it works. And then practice this as much as you can. Create variables inside of methods and also call upon them to test if they are working. And that should be okay for this video. Just learn this for today. In our next video, we'll continue this series. So if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up as usual. Subscribe to my channel to get more of this content. I would explain every single thing in detail. If you don't understand it, also comment down below so I can make another video or try to explain it to you. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope I see you in my next video.